And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Whole Agenda Radio Show. I'm your host, Robert Pepino. And as always, I have the incredible Mr. Bob Chapman, who I have so aptly renamed Professor Chapman, who is steering us from fascism to freedom. And also this evening, we have a very special guest with us, is Steve Lendman. Steve Lendman has his own radio show. I believe it is 1 hour a week, and he has also written a book, How Wall Street Fleeces America, Privatized Banking, Government Collusion, and Class War. Bob, welcome to the program, and Steve, welcome to the program as well. It's so wonderful to have both of you on this broadcast.
Thank you, Robert. If I could get one comment in before I'll let Bob jump in, because I certainly want to hear what he has to say. My program runs 3 times a week, and it airs on weekends at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. That's when Bob comes on. And anyone can hear it live. They can hear it archived. It's called the Progressive Radio News Hour on the Progressive Radio Network. PRN has gotten to be very popular, and my program has gotten to be one of their most popular programs. It's because of guests like Bob. What else?
That's fantastic. My apologies, Steve. I didn't read into your bio that much, and I apologize.
Well, I don't think
Sometimes
my
that
bio.
happens.
I don't think my bio had it on the bottom of my articles, Robert. The bio. I haven't read that bio in so long. I don't remember what it has, but I don't think it says my program is on 3 times a week.
Oh, okay. And Bob, welcome to the program as always.
Well, thank you very much. I don't have anything special to tell you other than I did serve in the military, so Henry Kissinger would consider me one of those dumb animals. But other than that,
Yes,
we got news for these people. You know, they think they're the masters of the universe, and I get news for them. There's scads and scads of people all over the world who are as smart, if not smarter, than they are.
Well, personally, I don't think they're that bright because no one would be that brazen to try and do what they're doing and thinking they could get away with the total control, bringing in their old world order, not new, old world order.
And that's true. Yeah, um, I think they're living in the past is a good way to put it. I mean, there's so many wonderful things going on in humanity, and they're aware of it. It's just that they want to control. They want power, and the seat of their power is the financial system and the policing of the public, and that's what Stephen has written about. And it's a wonderful title, and we've recommended the book through the International Forecaster. And I hope it gets lots and lots of distribution because these are the things people should know.
Absolutely. And Steve, I will put up your link to your site, your blog on my website so people can find you through me as well. And the first thing I wanted to get into here, gentlemen, is what in the world are they trying to do to Greece? They have completely demoralized these people. They're throwing good money on top of bad, digital transactions on top of bad. And these people are going down in flames. They're just prolonging the explosion of Greece and the rest of Europe. And I just can't believe that this is going on.
Well, I'd like to speak first on this, and the reason why is I've spent so much time on it, and I've lived in Europe for years, although I've never lived in Greece. There's something you should know before we talk about it, and that is that late on Friday, the German Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe, they said to the Bundestag, which is the House of Representatives, which had just passed a second approval of financing, including leveraging with derivatives, that you can't do that. And so they're going to have a commentary and decision sometime before the end of the year. So all of the things you have heard are up in the air. And also, you've got a situation where when you have things extended in time, you've got a real problem. And that problem is the extension of time causes failure indirectly. And, the stock markets of the world have been going up because they think everything is going to be okay in Europe, and these masters of the universe are going to make it all right. Well, it isn't going to be as easy as they thought. And, interestingly enough, the federal court told the House of Representatives, look, you can't do that. But they did it anyway, which is very interesting. Desperate people do desperate things. Maybe they thought that there was going to be some sort of a different approach that they could get together over the next 2 months. I don't know. But the point is this, it changes the game. And I've been on radio, television, in the press in Greece for over 2 years. And the only way to handle it is, and I said this 2 years ago, bankruptcy, go back to the drachma, price at 50% of what the euro is, put in austerity that's reasonable, and go on with your lives. And that's going to happen in many countries in Europe. And this dream of one world government via the European Union and the euro and the eurozone, forget it. They've blown it again.
Bob, I think they've really proved that you cannot take 17 dissimilar countries and package them in a eurozone system under one currency with a central bank running the monetary policies of all countries. So, it would be, you match Germany, an economic juggernaut, up against an Ireland or a Greece. It would be like you or I getting in the ring with Mike Tyson at his prime. I mean, you would wonder how many seconds it would take for him to kill us, not knock us out, but to kill us. I mean, it's just a crazy system. And you've written in the International Forecaster that you predicted this thing would fail 12 years ago. It really now has proved that it simply was unworkable. I can't believe that smart people didn't know it was at the start, but we really see the system is completely breaking down, and they simply kick the can down the road a little longer by throwing more money at it. They're buying time, but the more money they throw at it, the worse it's getting. How do you put out a fire? By throwing fuel on it. How do you get out of a debt problem? By creating more debt. You and I could run the Eurozone better than these people.
Well, you're right about that, and it's a tragedy that nobody else was talking about what I was at that time. Kurt Rickenbach, who's now deceased, a wonderful, wonderful economist. I forget whether he was German or Swiss, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But he was the only one that I know of that had the same ideas that I had. Actually, it was about 15 years ago because we, or at least I, started writing and talking about it earlier on because I knew that the 6 nations that are in trouble now were going to get in trouble. They all cheated to get into the Eurozone, and they culturally, and this is what you were talking about, Stephen, it is an unnatural association. And I've seen a lot of writers pick up that phrase, and I'm happy about it. And it could not work. You have a situation where you must, as a country, meet public debt of less than 3% of GDP. Now, for those 6 countries to do that, it's impossible. Second of all, one interest rate is good for everybody. Well, gee, as Stephen pointed out, Germany's a juggernaut. I mean, these people get up at 4 in the morning and they work until 7 o'clock at night. I know, I live there. And the Swiss are the same way. And, they're very, very hard to beat or to be competitive against. and you have an interest rate in Germany of 3.5%. Well, the normal interest rate in the other 6 countries will vary from 5 to 8%. So what they did is they opened up the floodgates of money, and everybody just borrowed as much as they could in those countries and got themselves in serious trouble. And they didn't have a constitution, so there was no guideline. And Stephen brought up the European Central Bank handling the monetary policy. Well, how about the fiscal policy? Each nation runs its own fiscal policy. Now, they'd like to move that closer to union, but you can't do that. It's too late. They blew it. And when you have fiscal sovereignty, we'll call it, then how can the ECB effectively work? They can't. So the system just can't work.
Well,
Indeed.
I agree, absolutely. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Oh,
off.
no, no, no. I wanted to let you get a comment in, Robert. But, Bob, you're the expert on it. But from the stuff the research that I do and the things that I write, and I love quoting you in the article I drafted this morning on the bailout. I quote you, Bob, from today's forecaster. And in the article I got out this morning that I wrote yesterday, I quoted you from the midweek forecaster. And your comments are very important, and readers need to hear them. And this stuff is just horrifically bad that they're coming out with, and they literally are doing nothing to save things. I don't understand why a country, with these countries pressured to get into this euro system, 17 countries, or at the beginning, did they really believe, the smart people in all of these 17 countries, did they really think that whatever conditions existed a dozen years ago when the economy was sound, the 1990s, things were going well, did they ever think that hard times wouldn't come along and that one country would be doing much better than another? But they all have to play by the same rules, and the rules are very strict. They're constricted on inflation levels, on debt levels, and of course they can't control their money. They have no control over their fiscal policy. How do you run a country under a system like that? I mean, if I were in charge of the finances of a country and I was the one who would give the bottom line recommendation, do we get into this thing or don't we? I absolutely would say this is insanity. We want absolutely nothing to do with it. If somebody would go along with my point of view, but 17 countries jumped into this thing, and now they have a real mess on their hands.
Well, I agree with you. I think everybody should
Well,
have stayed with their own currency to begin with, but that's how they manipulated and coerced all these countries into this euro bubble.
I call it brazen arrogance and the blind idea that they can create a world government. These are the politicians and bureaucrats who are financially and otherwise controlled by the banking community and others, transnational corporations, etc. And they are again and again and again pushing for this thing. And to answer Stephen's question, why do they do that? They must, their whole mission in life is world government. And that's all they think about. And they just hope it'll work. I mean, as Stephen pointed out, these people aren't smarter than we are. And they make mistakes. Everybody does. But, they think they come from on high someplace. And that just isn't the case. And that's why they do what they do.
Yeah, it's a sad, crying shame. Here's something that I thought about. I mean, you have these manipulators at the top who are trying to bring in this old world order to this closure, I guess, to have this total control. But there's a lot of people within governmental structures who are completely unaware of what these people are doing and just simply thinking that they are doing the right thing and helping the system along when in actuality they are being manipulated as well. Now, I don't know how many of those are honest, good, hardworking people, or how many of them are actually part of the minion class, and that's something that's disturbing as well, because there's so many people who work in official positions in local governments and the federal government, and I think they actually believe that what they are doing is the right thing.
Well, I think that that's true in every country in history, and everything that everybody does within history. It's a story of man, his story, and we're human beings, and we tend to look at the brighter side of things for the most part. 95% of the people who live in every society are good, decent people. And so they are not used to thinking about the machinations of people who are evil. In fact, the concept of those, when people are have things explained to them, the concept is so evil and diabolical that most decent-minded human beings cannot accept it. They don't think that people can be that evil. And that is a very important point on why people, when these things are explained to them, say, no, no, that couldn't happen. Not in America or not in Germany or whatever. And that is what's happening. There are those people out there. I mean, by their very utterances themselves, saying what they've said
Well, there's
in
no
the past.
question. There's no question, Bob. I absolutely agree with you. And I write about so many different things. The economy and financial issues are simply one topic, and I certainly do a fair amount on that. I do it as important things come up, like the Eurozone bailout deal. That really struck me. I knew I wanted to write something about it, and it ended up that I did two articles. But there's such a range of topics that concern me, and it can be anything from, again, the economy. It can be war and peace. It could be corporate favoritism. It could be the U.S. prison system. I wonder how many people know that America by far has the largest prison system in the world, and I'm talking about the one at home, and I call it what it is. It's a gulag. That's aside from the ones overseas.
Steve, I don't mean to cut you off. We're coming up on a break here, real quick.
Okay.
We'll pick it up on the other side. So, everybody, stick with us. This is the Whole Agenda Radio Show. I'm your host, Robert Pepino. And, of course, as always, we have Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster and our very special guest, Steve Lenman, joining us. We'll be right back after this break. And welcome back, everybody. This is the Whole Agenda Radio Show. I'm your host, Robert Pepino, and as always, we have Professor Bob Chapman and our very special guest, Steve Ledman, the author of How Wall Street Fleeces America. Welcome back to the program. And Steve, I didn't mean to cut you off at the break, but please continue with what you were saying.
Oh, I was just explaining off here that I write on many topics, Robert, and there are so many that concern me. And I mention off here the U.S. prison system is one. Something, everything has dollar signs attached to it, and the prison system. I mean, the bankers have their grubby paws and everything. They make money on the prison system. They make money on exploiting immigrant workers. They make tons of money on imperial wars, and of course they make so much on their speculative excess and outright thievery, where who knows how much they really steal, and then they offshore it to tax havens, and they literally get away with murder. And these are the people that have a stranglehold on the government, and they recycle their officials in and out of it. Secretaries of the Treasury, Geithner, former head of the New York Fed. I mean, it's a sick, corrupted system. I literally feel that my heart and soul and spirit are with the protesters on the streets, but I don't really think they understand what they're up against and what they need to do to fix the problem, or how many years at best it would take to really get any kind of redress. And my feeling is that the system is so corrupted and broken that the only solution is we need to tear it down and start over again, beginning with a new constitution. If somebody gave me the choice of how do you want to remake this country, that would be the way I would start.
Well, I sympathize.
No, I think that's. Go ahead.
I just was going to say that I sympathize, and I believe that you're right, because Bob's actually stated this before. He says if 20% at most know what's really going on, it's going to take a lot more than that to restructure our whole system and our way of life, because our Constitution has been trashed, destroyed by these greedy monsters, the minions class, who are controlled by the echelon, the elites, whatever you choose to call them, and the constant manipulation of the gold market. And again, gold is back on the rise. It's up actually with it going up with a vengeance. And of course, the dollar. I know that it doesn't have much relation to gold anymore, but every time it reaches that 75 cents, 74 cents, even 73, they prop it back up like like nobody's business, and people are completely unaware of it. And, and here's another thing, and I want to address this to both of you, Bob, Steve, is the fractional reserve banking process that these people use. I mean, who came up with this scam that one bank or the central bank gives a smaller bank $1 million, and then they say, okay, well, you're allowed to loan up to 10 times or almost 10 times that amount. It's all fictitious. It's a phony baloney system. So you go to a bank for a loan, they're giving, yes, the man in the suit behind the desk, oh, we'd be happy to give you a loan for $100,000. They're giving you absolutely nothing, and you're paying them back in real interest. That's the thing that blows me away, and it is so disgusting, and people are so unaware of it. Bob?
Well, I think you'll have to go back to Hammurabi and discuss it with him, because he was one of the early bankers, so to speak, and he was really into that. But anyway, the fractional banking system has been used for centuries, and it was started out by the money changers and gold merchants and merchants of other kinds as well. In fact, well over 1,000 years ago, they had letters of credit, which most people don't realize, and that's how they transferred wealth from one place to another. And of course, this 10-to-1 ratio, historically, really, it's been 7 to 8 to 1. They just extended it to 9 to 10 to 1 in the last 50 years. And if you look back at the marketplace 3 years ago, when the markets collapsed and we had the beginning of the credit crisis, you'll find that the leverage on banks on average was 40 to 1. And the brokerage houses and the hedge funds were 100, 200, whatever they wanted to 1. And they were acting like banks as well, only they got their money from the banks. And so really it's a Ponzi scheme. I do want to throw one thing in here about the penal system. Stephen is certainly correct. And I discussed this some years ago with Gary Kleck, who's head of the criminology department at Florida State, who is purported to be at number 1 or one of the top 5 professors in criminology in the nation. And I said, well, how do you fix this? And the first thing that he said, well, you've got to do away with private penal institutions, because the more people in jail, the more money they make. And who do they put in jail? All of these young minority children, well, young people, for starters, and then the poor. And they get linked into this, usually via drugs. I mean, there's some hardcore bad kids out there, too. And if drugs were legalized, we wouldn't have this. And, what's the percentage? I don't know, but it's got to be at least 30% in drug-related crime that put people in jail. And one other fact, in speaking with Gary years past, is that he was one of the few liberals who was really against gun control and said people should have the ability to have weapons under the Constitution. And he's been in the forefront of that for many years, and I'm proud of him taking that position.
Steve?
Well, Bob, I think you're right on the money on the percent of people in prison. I think it varies from about 25% to about 1/3 of the people in prison for nonviolent drug offenses. We're not talking about the big drug barons, the big drug lords. We're talking about ordinary people who maybe are among the 26 or so million who can't find work, and they need to do something to bring in a buck. And if they have to traffic drugs to make a little money to feed their family, they'll do whatever it takes. It's not wouldn't be my idea of a way to earn a livelihood, but it sure beats starving. And these are the kind of people they put in prison. They don't put the corporate bosses who steal billions of dollars, maybe trillions of dollars. And half of the people in prison are nonviolent. Most of them should have been had misdemeanor charges at most. They shouldn't be locked up in places like San Quentin. And some people are called extremely dangerous who are not, and they put them in these supermax prisons where they keep them isolated in solitary confinement. And some people can stay there for years. It's almost impossible, if they leave somebody there long enough, that person would not come out absolutely mad. I mean, the human psyche simply cannot tolerate that. One more comment on that. A couple of times in articles I wrote, I said, imagine if you had a small bathroom about the size of a prison cell or smaller, windowless, and you were locked in it for 24 hours, maybe with a mat to lie down on, and enough food and water to get by for 24 hours, but you couldn't come out. You couldn't come out for any reason. You had to stay there. I mean, that would just drive you nuts. And then my tagline was, imagine spending the rest of your life there. Some people do.
Well, I
That's right.
agree. I certainly agree. And I would say that it's even worse. I mean, people don't realize all they have to do is take a look around. What do you think the TSA is all about? I mean, this went from the Third Reich, Nazi Germany, to the United States, to the Fourth Reich here. You got TSA agents putting their hands all over people, not only at airports, but at bus stops, at stadium games. I mean, we are living in a massive prison system, and we are all enclosed, locked in these urban uh, jungles, and people are unaware of it. There's they're not looking at the bigger picture. We are already in a prison system, and we are slaves in this prison system. Bob?
Well, I think probably the worst place is Chicago.
The worst place?
I thought I'd get your attention, Stephen.
Well, I mean, given that we have a mayor who was an unindicted war criminal, I have a hard time disagreeing with that. And we literally had czarist
I mean,
rules.
the corruption there, it reminds me of the old days of the machine politics, which are unbelievably corrupt, like they are today, but on a different level. They knew how to take care of the people as well, and that's not being done today. They don't let anything fall through the cracks. A good example of that, and I use this example because of Stephen. We both came from Boston, but James Michael Curley was the governor of Massachusetts and the mayor of the city of Boston for many years. But every morning he would have a long line out in front of his home, and he'd be issuing jobs and welfare and all of these things. So they took care of people even though they were a bunch of crooks. And there was sort of like a Robin Hood system. It wasn't good, but it sure beats what we got today when nothing comes down through the cracks.
Well, I remember James Michael Curley well. Seems to me that he once ran for either governor or mayor from a jail cell, and I think he may have won the election. I mean, it's astonishing, but he actually
he did win the election, and it was in Danbury Federal Penitentiary, and he was in there for wire fraud. Now, how they ever got him in that, I don't know. But anyway, I met him several times when I was a boy, and I knew Tip O'Neill quite well too, who became the Speaker of the House, and Tip was a very strange man.
Another man from Massachusetts. You're back. He was Speaker during the Reagan years. I remember him well. Oh my goodness! I mean, we could really reflect on a lot of older times. But I mean, there were lots of things that were better in olden days. Although there were many things that were just as bad as they are now. Today we have wars in Libya, in Iraq, Afghanistan, and proxy wars. And way back we had the Korean War. I was still in college, and probably you too, Bob. And then the Vietnam War. I mean, we just seem to segue from one war to another. And in between the wars that people can name, there are lots of other wars going on, proxy ones. And I mean today, how many people know that America is at war with Yemen, with Somalia, with Uganda? How many people know that we have special forces death squads, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, people like Delta Force, people like this? Admittedly, in 120 countries, there are only 193. Admittedly, in 120, I have a feeling it's a lot more than that. And I almost wonder, is there any country in the world where we don't have these people? There may not be.
Well, I agree with you, Stephen.
You know, it's interesting that you bring this up. I was living in San Diego, actually in La Jolla, and a friend of mine, his brother was a Navy SEAL, and he was an instructor in the SEAL team. I think it was 7. And so I like to play golf, and they have a nice course at Coronado. And the way you get in there is to go in with military people. And so I used to play golf with them down there all the time. So one night we went out after we finished to have a beer before we went home. And one of the guys, he popped about 5 beers in a row real quick, and he got a little talkative. And he broke down and cried. He said, all I know how to do is murder people. I'll never forget it. And he said, what am I doing here? It was quite an ordeal. I had to calm him down because the other guys, even though they work with him, uh, they didn't have the ability to do that, and I did. But the point here is that it's dreadful that we have to have people controlled by government who are special murderers. I mean, I know we have to defend our country, but we don't have to go out through the world murdering heads of countries and other people, and they do that all the time. I had a friend of mine, Mitch Rebell, who was the station master for the CIA in San Jose, Costa Rica, and I can tell this story now because he's deceased. Anyway, after he finished and was on retirement, he couldn't sit still, so the CIA hired him to murder Rafael Trujillo in the Dominican Republic. And he told me exactly how they did it, him and another guy. Now, this is not what our government's supposed to be doing. I mean, normal people don't do those things. And, of course, they pursued Fidel Castro for all of his shortcomings. And he's no angel. Incidentally, he's a subscriber to my publication, so I can't say too many bad things about him.
Oh, that's wonderful.
What was the bottom line there? They treated him the same way by trying to murder him. And you don't have to do things like that. It's not necessary. And we know that.
Right.
This is standard policy, Bob. And in the case of Castro, I've written a little bit about Cuba. I did a major article, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I called it Cuba under Castro. I remember it well. And in the article, I mentioned that there may have been as many as 500 or more attempts to kill him. He's been around since 1959, and he's been targeted for over 5 decades. He's about 86 now, and he had a serious illness that maybe he himself thought that the end was coming, but he came back. And he's a tough old bird, and I hope he goes on for a while. The best thing about him is that, of course, he threw out the Batista regime, that the Batista regime that literally turned Cuba into a brothel. I mean, it was a cesspool of crime and corruption. It was just a hideous place, and Castro cleaned them all out. And he just wanted Cuba to be run by Cubans, which is the way it should be. You can agree or disagree with them. You can disagree with any leader, but I believe every country is sovereign, and their own people have a right to run their country the way they want. And it's none of our business what they want to do, unless they go around attacking other countries. Then it's the business of all other countries. But Cuba didn't attack anybody. Certainly never threatened the U.S. and would made life.
Well, I've been there. I've been there since, and I'm not supposed to go there, but I went there anyway. And nobody can prove it except by my words. But I found the people there within government as well as the people on the street very nice. My Spanish isn't all that good, but we get along fine. And I had a very nice time. There's not much to do there because they're still living in the 1960s. And the cabs are Mercedes, but there's lots of them that are 67 Chevys too.
Right.
And excuse me, 57 Chevys. And but I enjoyed it. I wouldn't want to live there. I think that they should have the opportunity to catch up with the rest of the world.
I agree, and they're manufacturing those parts for those cars right there. They just started manufacturing the parts for them because they could no longer get the parts. But we're coming up at the end of the show here. Steve, I want to thank you very, very much, and I'd like to very much have you back on the show. whenever possible. And as always, Bob, please give out your information, and then Steve, you follow right afterwards.
Well, the International Forecast is about business, finance, economic, social, and political issues all over the world. We publish by email on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Runs around 35 or 40 pages usually. And we have a hard copy that goes out twice a month for those who are not on the Internet. Everything you need to know each week is in that publication. If you'd like to get a free introductory copy, you can go to our website, theinternationalforecaster.com. Theinternational, FORECASTER.com. You can also go to www.intforecaster.com, intforecaster.com. For those of you who would like to ask a question, because we answer everyone, or get a copy of either publication, or if you'd like a report on our latest recommendations on gold and silver shares, email us at Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com, Bob at intforecaster.com. And for those of you who'd like to call toll-free, that number is 877-479-8178. 877-479-8178. And they're making a special offer there for those of you who would like to become subscribers. The offer is for a free one-year subscription. And the deal that they're offering is really terrific, and you should take advantage of it.
And that's fantastic. Steve, please give out your information.
Oh, I sure will, Robert. Number one, I'd be delighted to come back on your program anytime. I'm delighted you invited me on today. And let me put a plug in for Bob's International Forecaster. I read it all the time, and I love quoting Bob from it. It literally is a treasure trove of information that you're not going to read or hear about unless you read it in the Forecaster. And the stuff that does come out comes out weeks or sometimes months later. You literally can become an insider by the information that Bob provides. But it really is a marvelous service, Bob, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. For me, I'm just an aging retiree. I had one working life. What I do now, I do as a volunteer. I do an awful lot of writing. Listeners can follow me on my blog site. Simply Google my name, Lendman, LENDMAN. That's the way I access my blog. All my articles are there. My radio program, there's a bio there. There's information on my book. I think you'll know about as much about me as I know about myself. It's all there on my blog site. And if you take a look at the articles I write, you'll see a great breadth of topics and an awful lot of articles. I literally get them out daily, and this has become my passion. And I feel that I want to spread the word on vital issues. And I love going on air on radio or television. And I never even had an interview until May 2006. And I couldn't imagine I would ever host my own program. I'm delighted to do it. And if somebody wants me to come on, I absolutely want to do it. I'm committed to getting the truth out. That's my bottom line.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you so very, very much. And everybody listening to this broadcast, please go visit his website, his blogspot, purchase his book. You're going to find his information invaluable. Same as Bob Chapman with the International Forecaster. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very, very much. Bob, I will see you next Tuesday. You have a wonderful, wonderful week and a wonderful weekend. And Steve, I want to thank you and I bless you for coming on to this program. And I will be in touch with you to have you back on the program.
Oh, marvelous. Again, thank you, Robert. And Bob, it was terrific being on with you today.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was just terrific.
You and I will be doing it again in November.
Thank you again, gentlemen. This has been the
We're
whole...
going to be doing it until we can't do it anymore because we don't get paid to do it. That's why.
And again, I want to thank you both. This has been the whole agenda. Stick around for the second hour of the broadcast. I'm your host, Robert Pepino. We'll be right back after this break.